So for this session, this is my background is kind of split between pedagogy and technology, instructional design. So I kind of have a foot in both camps. So for this session, we just heard recently in the earlier session about innovation with technology. And I think that it's also important to have innovation with thinking about your course design. So if we have this innovative product and we have faculty that just want to take their traditional course and plop it into Canvas the way they've always done it, it doesn't take full advantage of that innovative feature within the software. So I'm going to talk about a model that I use with faculty that was designed by a geographer, Dee Fink, and he wrote a book in 2003 called Creating Significant Learning Environments, and it uses a different process for course design than the traditional instructional design process. And I find that it makes faculty kind of look at their course through a different lens, from a different perspective, and the students that I have in my class, I see that they think more creatively about their activities and their assessments. I think this is a really good fit with Canvas because there is such innovation and flexibility within the system that if you can have an instructor say, this is what I really want to do, now how do I do this in Canvas? That's a better way than coming in and kind of saying, I want to use Wimba, and I say why, and they really don't know why, or they want to integrate something within the software. So that's what we're going to talk about. Okay, so at the end of this session, you'll be able to describe what backwards design is, which is what we're going to talk about. You're also going to see how this model has been adapted in a course that I designed and I've been teaching for 3 years. Recently migrated it to Canvas. So I'm going to show you how I redesigned things and why I did what I did. And I'm also going to talk about how this model is also being adopted across campus for a model for not only credit courses, which is what I teach, where I have faculty and teaching assistants teach, but it's also going to be used for consultations to help faculty design courses that are not taking credit courses. So one of the purposes of all of this is to kind of get everybody on the same page. So the Center of Teaching and Learning does pedagogy, our tech department does the technical part, and we're all trying to get on the same page and use the same language, use the same model. So when faculty take a course, they can very easily transition from a course into a consultation. Or they can start with a consultation and take a course. So we're trying to get everybody on the same page. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to ask you to take 1 minute. This is going to be really short. The first step of doing backwards design is to go to the end of your course and decide what you want your students to be able to do, to know, what kind of dispositions they want to have. So I'd like you to think about a course that you're either designing or that you're teaching, and what is your dream for that course? So in the best of all worlds, at the end of a course, what do you want your students to be able to do, to know, or to be? This is a goal. It's a vision. It's very broad. So I'd like you to take 1 minute. I'm going to time you. Okay. We just need the first part, not the two sub-questions. Okay, does somebody have a dream that they'd like to share? Anybody? Yes. Yes. I want to be a stay-at-home mom. That's not with the course, Rebecca. A dream for a course. Anybody have a dream?
I'd like the students to be able to create their own personal learning environment and also be able to market themselves.
That's a great goal. One more. Way in the back. Oh, we should talk about the microphones, huh? Well, okay. Okay, both of these examples are not really about the foundation knowledge that you would teach in a course. It's more about a value-added level of going beyond the content. So for the first one, you can teach them marketing skills and marketing information, but having them create their own personal learning environment and be able to market themselves, that goes beyond just the foundational knowledge, okay? So if you think about the dreams that you wrote down, this is Fink's taxonomy of significant learning. It's based on Bloom's taxonomy, which is a taxonomy developed in the 50s that looks at different levels of learning, foundation knowledge up to higher level learning. Fink's model also looks at different levels of learning, but they're not hierarchical, so that they're different. The ones on the left side of the circle, caring, human dimension, learning how to learn, are things that people always say they want their students to be able to do, but they never design that into their course. They're worried about covering the content that they're going to have in their course. So if you can think about this at the beginning and how you can have students apply content, integrate content, how you can get them to care about the content. These are different levels of learning. So this is where you would go to the end of the course, decide what you would want to do, and then work backwards from there to design your teaching activities and assessments. Another aspect of this model is that it's integrative, so that they overlap. For example, I worked with a faculty member teaching a service learning course, so that there was foundational knowledge, but it was mostly application of what they were learning. But the human dimension and caring pieces were really important for her course. Whereas if you were teaching a technical technology course, it may not be human dimension and caring, but it may be more about learning how to learn. So if you could think about different levels of learning and what you would expect your students to do at the end. The main part of the model is about aligning these pieces. So Fink actually has, and I'll make this PowerPoint available. I don't know if they're going to, are we going to have a place to post materials? So this will be posted so you can get these links and you can go out to the web. Dee Fink has a free guidebook on how to do this. So you can go to the web, download this, and use this as you go through the course design process. This alignment process is really important so that what you say you want your students to be able to do, that you assess that and your activities align to that. A lot of faculty tell me, I want my students to be critical thinkers, but then they give them multiple choice exams that are only measuring foundation knowledge. So this model kind of gives you a different perspective on how to put the pieces together so that they align and you actually are going to have critical thinkers at the end of your course. One difference that I work with is instead of learning goals, I call them objects or outcomes. And then I use that dream exercise as the big overarching goal. So first you do your dream exercise. From that dream exercise, then you write objectives that are measurable, that match up to that big goal. Situational factors is what Fink asks you to do, which is really a needs assessment for those instructional designers in the room. The situational factors is really doing a needs assessment. What kind of students do you have? What kind of format? An online course has special factors that you need to think about when you're designing an online course as opposed to a face-to-face. What level are the students? What's the approach of the instructor? What does the instructor think about how students learn? All those factors influence how the course design is designed. So the first step is to do the dream exercise and then define your objectives. The second step is to do what's called the alignment. So you have to align your objectives to your teaching activities and your assessment. So Fink uses what's called an alignment grid. And this is just a blank one. And it's not going to open. And really all it is 4 columns where you put your learning goals in the first column, how you're going to assess that learning goal in the second column, the teaching activities in the third, and then your resources. This creates a visual map for faculty so that they can see exactly what their course is about, what the big issues are, what the big topics are. And I have an example for the course we're going to talk about. This is my alignment grid for a course that I teach for graduate students and faculty on how to teach online courses. So I wrote objectives. Then I decided how I'm going to assess that learning, and then what the activity is. Okay. So you'll notice my first objective is to experience the learning management system from a learner and a teacher perspective. So in the very beginning of the course, they act like students. They do online discussions. They submit assignments. They act like a student. They always tell me, wow, this is like eye-opening because now I know what my students are going through. Then they design their course. So as they go through, they explore issues related to online pedagogy, and then they actually design their course. Okay. So when I do this map, this gives me a visual map of what my course is really about. This map we use for online course design, but everyone that takes my course takes it out and uses it for traditional courses, for hybrid courses that they're designing, because this really helps them to visualize what's important in their course. I've been doing a lot of work with our TAC organization at UEVU, and what they tell me is my students that come out of my class come to TAC with their alignment grid, and they say, this is what I want to do. Help me do this. Where before they would come in and say, well, I want to do this or I want to do that. They really didn't have a vision for what they wanted to do. Where this map really gives them a map to follow, what's important. Okay. Active learning is also an important part of this model. So traditionally we think of passive learning as a lecture. You come to class, you lecture, the students, you open up their heads, you dump in that information, right? A lot of faculty, when they start to design online courses, want to take their lectures and put them online. They want narrated PowerPoints and they want to do a quiz, just like they do in their traditional course. Where Fink advocates for these 4 areas. So instead of lecturing, how are you going to get students to use the content and do something? How are you going to get the students to reflect on the content? How are you going to get them to observe and make connections with the content? And how are you going to get them to work with each other? When I show faculty this diagram, they're like, oh, well, this gives me great ideas, because now I can see what you're asking me to do, where before if I would say, let's do some active learning as a faculty developer, I really wasn't giving them enough specific information. But Fink provides a lot of diagrams that helps faculty really be able to visualize what they want to do in their course. Okay. The third step is to use that alignment grid to structure and sequence their course. So once they have all their objectives and their activities and their assessments, then they have to decide what order do these go in? How can I chunk them together into modules? It's all there on the grid. Once they get that grid, it's really much easier for them to do this. And so we're going to look at a Canvas course. Okay. This is my Canvas course, and this was in our sandbox, not this semester, because I took all my students out so I could just show you this one. In my course, students want to use the module feature because it's like WebCT, which is what we used before. So I'm kind of forcing them to use the wiki pages, to think differently about how they would put their course together. So I create my course using wiki pages. I use video, I use graphics. This graphic is a Wordle of advice from the students from last semester, telling them what they're going to have to do to be successful in the course. And I use it as my graphic every semester. I link it to a text file, which isn't going to work. That's okay. So that they can actually read the comments. And then I've done the module setup to actually be the process of course design. So I have 4 modules, and that first module, which is design, is really, Module 1 is really where I do the think process. They do their objectives, they create their alignment grid, they do their structuring. Then they begin to decide how those technology tools are going to fit with their objectives and what they want to do. Then we also talk about the communication and building online community piece in the Teach module. So it's great to have really good content in a module, but you want to also know how the students are going to interact. How are you going to interact with them? How are you going to communicate? How are you going to get them to build a community? Oh dear, that's not good. All right, I'll go back to my PowerPoint.
It's okay, because none of us have ever lost our internet connection.
Oh yeah, I tested it all morning. I'm like paranoid, I logged in, got it all working. In the middle, it just goes. Okay. So the modules are set up to take them through the process of a course design. My module pages are all wiki pages, and I've written them out in text, so it's kind of like having a consultation with the students. I do little video, use the video tool, and I create little video clips, and I talk to them about what they're going to do this week and why they're going to do this and why it's important to have the alignment grid. So that it's kind of like having a consultation with them about creating course design, but they're doing it within a course. Okay. This is a model that, taken from my course, my 4 modules, we're using at the University of Utah to create a consultation process for faculty. So these 4 areas in the middle, design, build, teach, and revise, are the 4 phases that we want to take them through in the course design process. The red on the outside, I'll talk about these in the middle in a minute. These are what we identified as 6 quality elements for the course design. The elements are linked directly to the phases of course design. So at the end of the design phase, which is this first phase, the students will have created objectives and they'll have organized their course. So these are real-world activities, real-world objectives that they're doing in the course. The build phase is where they're going to link the technology pieces in. Okay, so this is what I want to do. I have my plan. Now I need to build it. Okay. The teach part is where we talk about the communication, the support, and the building community. And the revise is where they would revise their course. In the cyber pedagogy course, the students create a test course. From their alignment grid, they create a home page. They create 3 components of their course in the course. They don't create a full course. There's really not time for that to do a full course over the semester because they have readings to do, additional work that they have to do. At the end, they peer review each other's courses using a rubric that the first course, the first class of students created in the first time I taught this course, and we use that rubric to grade those online courses. Okay. There is a quality online course design, and I think that web link was actually working. So in this PowerPoint is a link to our Aquella page, which is open to everyone, and we have a white paper which lays out the 6 elements, which you'll be able to go and see, as well as the process for the 4 phases of course design. Okay. We also talk about, on our campus, how we can coordinate support. So that the design phase and the revise phase are more pedagogical. And usually it's done through consultation in the center of teaching. But the build phase and the teach phase are more technical, and they're done through tech. And I don't know how your campuses are, but we lose faculty. So they come to one department, and they don't know who to go to for the next stage. So in this case, we've created a consolidated model where we can pass faculty off. So they would come to me, they do their objectives, they take their alignment grid to TAC, TAC helps them create their course, and then they come back when they want to do the revise. Another important aspect of this model is that faculty can come in at any stage. So in my course, since it's a 3-credit course, they come in at the design stage, and they begin the process from the beginning. But they could also already have a course, and they just want to redesign in Canvas one of those activities. They would come in the build phase. Or if they already are teaching a course but they don't have an online community component, they could come in the teach phase. Or if they've already taught the course and they say, this didn't work, look at my course evaluations, help me figure out what didn't work, then they can come in at the revise phase. So the model is set up so that it's done to meet the needs of the faculty depending on where they are in their process of course design. Okay. And then I just have slides which have the 2 objectives for each of the phases, which I won't go through because you'll be able to download this PowerPoint. I'm running out of time here a little bit. And I want to have some time for questions. Okay. So we've kind of taken the Fink process of design and then made a model that we're using on campus for both technical and pedagogical support for online course design. In Canvas, the potential is so much more than in previous LMSs for what faculty can do. So before, faculty would say, well, for example, for nursing faculty would say, I have all this content, but when they do their grid, they say, well, I want them to be able to apply that content. So now they're designing case studies, and they're doing online case studies in their courses. And they can create wikis where students can contribute work together in a wiki project or in a collaborative project. So the software allows for the innovation that the model of design allows for, if that makes sense. Okay, anybody have questions? I know this is a lot for this short time. Yes?
Sorry, for those that aren't familiar with the software, you talked about using a wiki. Is that built into the software?
Yes. It's kind of like creating a web page. Like that web page I showed you is a wiki page. So there's only a single edit button. You click edit, you get the tools like you would get for regular wiki, and you create your web page. And the students, you have an option to say teachers or teachers and students. So I can make individual pages in my course available to my students, and they can edit them.
You make that your home page. When they come to your course page, it's that wiki page with links to the modules.
Correct. I also show them the module feature because in this course, modules may fit their course better. So for the first module, I do both. They can do it through the module feature or they can do it through the wiki page. I prefer the wiki page because I'm trying to emulate a consultation process. I don't really want them to go to the module page and just click through next, next, next. I want them to actually reflect and think about that consultation part. Yes?
Start that backward design with that first question, what do you want your students to be able to do, et cetera, so forth. And they say critical thinkers, but yet they're, the way they've designed their course. What do you do to instill in them to move away from the way they've done it, to move into, to focus on those learning outcomes?
Okay, so when they say they want critical thinkers, and then they go to do their grid, and they have all their objectives, and they have quiz, test, quiz, test, quiz, test. Then we have that discussion. So is this quiz really going to meet this objective of helping them become critical thinkers? So yes, you have some content in your course that you have to test on, some foundation knowledge. So I talked to them about the difference and the tools that Canvas would provide. So there might be that they might have a discussion, they might compare and contrast articles, they might do research. So I make suggestions for other ideas, but they really see it. When they look at the grid, they're like, well, I have the same thing for every objective. So they see it themselves when they do it in the grid. Also, I do the objectives first, so I give them feedback on their objectives, and I try to get them to look at levels of learning in their objectives to kind of set them up for they can't do quiz, test for every objective. And that kind of helps as well. So then I say, well, if you're going to have this information, this is all about content, what else do they have to be able to do? For example, I worked with an advertising instructor, and she came into my office, thick advertising book, all upset. She was from industry, she had never taught. She said, I have to cover all this content, what am I going to do? So I said, what do you want them to do at the end of the course? And I'm from the Philadelphia area, and 95 runs through the city. So she said, when they drive down 95, I want them to look at a billboard and know why it's a man, not a woman, why they use this font, who the audience is. And I said, do you teach that? And she said, no, because I have to cover all this content in the book. So once she did her objectives, then she went back to her text and she picked the chapters and coordinated them with her objectives. And she made objectives. So for example, there was no practicing. She just assumed that when she taught them about an audience, they would know how to apply it. So she brought in Super Bowl ads. So she had them practice analyzing ads. In the end, after 2 years, she redesigned her course to be a service learning course, where she divided the students into advertising agencies, and she got a community person who needed advertising, and the students did a whole ad campaign in their groups. And then they pitched the campaign. That was their final project. So she really came really far from, I have to cover all these chapters in the text, to a complete application of the knowledge. So that would be, once you have that conversation, they kind of see it. Maybe. I've had a lot of luck. It's really about developing relationships. And I think that this model comes from a faculty background. It was a geographer that created this model. So if you read the book or the handout that's online, it speaks the faculty language. And everyone that I give it to is like, I do this. I do this in my head. I don't articulate it on paper. But when they articulate it on paper, they do a better job. Yes?
Can you describe how you use the Canvas wiki to support active learning in your class?
Yes. So in my class, there's a lot of peer editing and learning from each other. So I try to pretty much stay back. I come in and I give resources and links, but my course is a multi-discipline course. So students are taking my course from all different disciplines, and they really have a lot of perspectives that they provide to each other. So a lot of the discussion forums aren't really a discussion forum about a paper. It's kind of like, you read these 2 articles, now how does this work in your discipline? How is this different from someone else? And there's a lot of activity that happens on the discussion board where they integrate each other's information. And that's one thing that always comes out in the final reflection, that they can't believe how much they learned from each other. So there's a lot of activity there. The active part is they actually create their course. So there's assignments throughout the course that build on each other. So they start by reading articles, they develop their objectives, they create their course, they peer review their courses, they peer review alignment grids. So they're actually doing things as opposed to just reading articles. I don't give any exams, it's all project-based. Does that help?
I was curious, are they editing the wiki or?
For the wiki, I have a technology tool assignment where they have to go out and research a technology tool that might work in their course based on their design. And then they have to come back and on the wiki contribute to that tool. So they kind of get practice for how to create a wiki page while they're doing that assignment before they start developing their course. So then at the end, I compile all the wiki pages and zip them and give that to them as a takeaway for the course so that they have information. So this semester, somebody did Second Life, somebody did social bookmarking, somebody did podcasting. So all that information, they collect links, advantages, disadvantages, experiences, and then they share that. It's really neat to be able to have the students do things on the website instead of me always posting the content. Any other questions? Yes? I'm just beginning to use that feature for myself to link my objectives from my alignment grid, but I haven't worked with that with the students in this class because this is only our second semester of our pilot, and I'm just trying to get them into Canvas and feel comfortable with the environment. But I think that it has a lot of potential because then they'll see, like I show them my alignment grid and say, this is what you're going to be doing and this is why you're going to be doing it and these are how these link together. But the outcome assessment tool will actually do that for them. So when they go to the assignment, they'll know how that's linked to the objectives.
Learning outcomes tools has allowed me to start to think in terms of a more structured approach to type your attitude But one thing about that learning outcomes tool that's a little frustrating right now, it's good, but it also has a downside, is that you can create a learning outcome, but then to tag it or align it with some content, you first have to go through creating a rubric for assessment.
Right.
And that's good, because it sounds like it's part of that grid that you're talking about.
Right.
But sometimes I'm not just thinking about assessment, I just want to think about the content that you're teaching and the learning outcomes, and not be forced to use that rubric.
Right. I think that the grid works for me much better because it really gives each student a customized, visualized idea of what they're trying to do, all the way across the line, from the objective to the assessment to the activity. And I think that that works much better, in my case, for the course that I teach. But I would imagine for a content-heavy course that it would be helpful to be able to link those to a rubric for assignments. So if you have an assignment and a rubric, so I have a rubric for my final course reviews, I can link that to that rubric. But yes, I think it could still be easier to link things together, yes. Another question?
I'm wondering, since I heard this morning that there are updates every 2 weeks, how do faculty respond to every 2 weeks things could be different?
A lot of faculty don't realize the changes, but once you start looking at objectives and not the tools, then they focus on their objective and the tool doesn't become as critical. Like someone asked a question about when that tool disappears. I have this question also with textbooks. I design my whole course around a textbook and the textbook disappears. If you design around your objectives, then you can use any textbook. So it's the same thing for your tools or your upgrades. So they might not realize right away that they have an upgrade on a tool they're using, but you can bring that to their attention or they'll find it because they develop a comfort level that they can go in and look around. So if it's an objective, it's not tied to a tool. It's not tied to an upgrade. They have an objective for what they want to achieve. It's different. Because I had someone that did a whole design. I worked with them through design. They said, I'm designing it around my textbook. And then next semester she came back and said I had to redesign all over. And I tried to talk her into doing objectives and she wouldn't. I said, if you would have done objectives, then you can use your objectives to select your next textbook. You don't have to redesign your course.
Just as a follow-on comment, if people in the room are concerned about that 2-week thing, they might be familiar with other learning management systems. No names mentioned, but that version fairly regularly, and a version is a big deal. Canvas, you come in one Monday morning and some little tiny thing is different that you won't notice. So apart from your talk, which and your point about designing toward the objective, from the technology's perspective, these are not big revisions that happen every 2 weeks.
Right.
Minor incremental changes.
I think, too, I've worked with some faculty that seem to have more ideas about how they want those tools to be upgraded when they have objectives. So if they know what they really want to do, then they go to try a tool. And usually there's multiple tools they could use. For example, for critical thinking, they could write journals, they could do papers, they could have discussions. So it's not just one tool that they're linked to. They have an objective, and multiple tools can meet that objective. That then they're like, you know, I really would like to be able to do this to meet this objective. The software doesn't do this, and I say, click the feedback button and provide feedback, you know, that you want help with this. Okay, any other, last question, do we have time?
You said this stuff would be available?
Yeah, I'll make this PowerPoint available with all the links.
So that we